Hey, this is Mo Lunsford at Union Grove Lumber Studios.
And this is the Shed Geek. We want to welcome you to today's episode. Okay, welcome back to another episode of the Shed Geek podcast and New Horizons today. So this is fun. You guys have been hearing all about the podcast expansion project with Susan and Sam, and this is your first official Sambassador Friday. I don't know what we're calling these things.
Yeah, we don't have a tagline yet, so I can't lead it.
Yeah, we need to do something. We need to come up with something there. But whatever it ends up being, thank you guys for listening. This is the launch of Sambo, and being able to bring some haulers more into the limelight, if you will, I guess you'd say.
Yeah, I guess we're gonna focus on hauling mostly. If it overlaps, obviously we all overlap.
Yeah.
So that'll be fine. And I couldn't be happier to be anywhere else than to be at Mervin Miller's place. Like, I've never been here before. I don't know how not, but
I don't either. It's crazy.
So introduce to you Mervin Miller. He's been in hauling a long time. I actually saw where you commented on Susan's post the other day a little bit, and I found out that you'd done some stuff that I'd never heard of. So introduce yourself, give a short little synopsis on where we're at and what we're doing here as far as what do you do now?
Well, I guess just to kind of comment on what you just said about her post, I first got into the shed industry I thought it was 1990, but Woody said it's 91. Anyway, I mean, I know this happened in 91.
Oh, okay.
That thing, when I was working for Woody, but I was thinking I'd started in 90, but either way, it was back then sometime. And started out with Woody building sheds when he started his own shop, and then ran his delivery truck, that pretty sweet little 85 GMC with the 454 and the 4-speed.
Yeah.
So that was a trip. And then I was totally out of sheds for 10 years. Got back in it in 2001. Started my own shed lot in Aiken, South Carolina. Bought all my sheds, gazebos, play sets, furniture, all that stuff out of Pennsylvania. Hauled it down here, resold it. And then 08 kind of put the kibosh on that. And end of 09, I shut that down. But by then, we had already started hauling for Old Hickory when they opened the factory here in Blackville, 5 miles from my house, and they're like, hey, you want to haul sheds for us? I'm like, yeah, why not? And so I've been hauling for them for the last 17 years.
Wow.
So started with the one truck and trailer that I already had. And as they expanded the factory, I would add another truck, add another driver, add another truck. Mm-hmm. So now we're up to 7 trucks and 7 drivers.
Wow. And are we considered, we're in Blackville, South Carolina?
We are in Blackville.
That's where we're at? Okay. It's kind of crazy that Woody comes up now because Woody's telling his story.
Right.
40 years in the shed hauling business. And it was just through his story that I found out that he actually built sheds at one time. I've never known. Like, it's crazy where these stories go. Like, we got to get Woody back on again.
For sure.
And we will when we go up to he's throwing a huge 40th anniversary party. I'm guessing you're going.
I'm going to try to, for sure.
I'm going to try really hard. Yes. But yeah, it was through that stories where I first heard that he even built sheds at one time. Like, I always thought he was just in trucking. His story's incredible to be able to follow it where he's just, I've always kind of thought of him as a quiet, he keeps all his stuff to himself type of guy. And he has really opened up, and I love it. It's good. I like seeing this side, and I think it's helped a lot of people that are new in the industry and even guys that struggle along. It kind of helps along with that to see where his story is. And I knew you had worked for him, so I knew you were tied into that.
Right.
But so how did you end up in Pennsylvania? Because you're from here originally, right?
Right. I grew up down here. I was 14 when I guess I was 13. My sister married a dude from Lancaster County, and then my brother and I, my next older brother, can't throw my oldest brother into that. But my next older brother and I, we were a little bit mischievous, and so my parents decided it might be a good idea to move us to PA and maybe get us out of trouble. And so we went up there and spent 14 years up there.
So you moved up there with your parents?
Right.
Okay.
And then, of course, I met my wife up there.
Okay.
Lancaster County Amish girl that I misled, of course, and took her away from the Amish. But, yep, so I met my wife up there. And
so when did you get married?
89.
89.
Okay. Got married, moved down here for 6 months, and decided that we had too many friends up there. We didn't like it here, so moved back up again. And
oh, wow.
so, yeah, it was interesting. Yeah. It was an interesting period of time there.
I didn't know that you built sheds with Woody, and that's a perfect example of why I love sitting down for these interviews. You know, seeing Woody at the Shed Hauler Bash get up on stage and kind of tell his story, there was something not just nostalgic, but a little bit of magic in the air that like everybody can't explain, but they understand that comment. And then to see him follow up kind of on posting about the pictures and the different things. I think that there's there's a little historian in all of us. And this is kind of like our little piece of history whenever your day in and day out consists of shed related or some kind of like shed or other related industry. It's just your whole life is kind of, it's surrounded by that, much of that. So it's molded by a lot of that. And I had no idea that you built sheds with Woody until this very moment.
Yeah.
So I found out the other night.
Yeah, and then to make it even more interesting, back in probably 07, 08, somewhere along in there, I needed a semi, and I ended up buying one of his semis, Second Chance. I don't know if you remember that one.
Yeah, that's right.
So I bought the truck from him. I bought a raggedy old trailer he had there, and I went to hauling sheds from here to North Carolina. And so, yeah, it was like years later we hook up again and did business again for a little bit. Pretty cool.
So it's interesting that I'm actually tied in with that truck in a roundabout sort of way. I was driving down 25 one day, had sheds on, and I met this other hauler coming the opposite way, 4-lane highway, divided center, so I had plenty of time to see it. And he was in a little Dodge pickup truck that had dual stacks on the back of it, painted purple, and was hauling sheds. And I'm like, that is the goofiest thing I have ever seen. It had Peterbilt stacks on the back of this little Dodge. And that was the first time I ever saw him, was on that road. Well, then I got to see him around pretty regular. He'd be in Anderson, same time I was in Anderson. And finally hooked up with him one day over at a Ware Place and we were both stopped getting fuel and found out who he was and Dave Sumi and where he was out of. And I asked him about his purple truck, and he said, he bought that from Merv Miller that way because Merv had it matched to a trailer. But apparently the trailer was originally matched with this truck. Does that sound right?
So I bought the truck from Woody, and of course it had the purple frame. And so when I built the Dodge, I got the frame painted purple, block rack, everything, fenders, and Harley was driving that truck.
Okay.
Harley Geyser. So at some point in time, we talked about putting stacks on it. Well, I wanted to put bigger stacks on my Peterbilt. So I took the stacks off the Peterbilt, and we put them on the Dodge, and I put 7-inch straights on the Pete. So, then I got the purple trailer built to match the Dodge.
Okay, so the Dodge got painted to match the Peterbilt to start with.
Right.
Cool. That was the best sounding Dodge I'm partial to Dodges the way they sound anyway with the inlines, but that truck with those stacks on it, it was perfect. It was like you couldn't have cut them an inch shorter or made them an inch longer and had the perfect tone.
Yep.
And so I ended up buying that truck. I bought it. I told Dave, I said, if you ever sell that truck, I want it. And bought it after, I guess you had worked all the bugs out of it because apparently it was a problem child. And I had that truck for, I think, close to 2 years. And we never did anything to it, period. I mean, change oil in it, drive it. It had a little bit of a noise in the transmission, but nobody ever worried about it. Everything worked fine. And then I turned around and I sold it. Kevin Cook actually bought it, and he had nothing but trouble out of it. So then he turned around and he sold it to a guy up in New York, Daniel Yoder, who we all know Daniel Yoder because he won the Bash Peterbilt a couple years ago. And Daniel is still running that truck today. Now, he just did a whole, I don't know if you've seen that post, but he did a whole bunch of work to that little truck. And but one of the first things that he had to do when he got that thing is he had to take the stacks off. New York would not let him have those stacks.
That was depressing.
And I almost told him, I said, you got to sell that truck back to me just so we keep that truck the way it is.
Yep.
But it's, you must have worked all the bugs out of it because that thing will not quit.
Well, and that's like I commented on his post. I said, I thought that thing was wore out when I sold it to Dave, and then he sold it to you, and then you sold it to Kevin, and Kevin, so I'm like,
it's been
that crazy thing's still going down the road. Yeah. Like, wow. Yeah. I bought that truck brand new.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Okay.
07.
What's so interesting, man, is this is to me, this is a recorded version of every shed barbecue, every shed hauler bash I've been to. 100 of these conversations that happen at those tables that never have a microphone
that should have
in front of them.
Yeah.
That I always say will make the best podcast you'll never hear is really sitting down at those tables and just listening to this kind of conversation, right? Because shed haulers are a breed of their own. I mean, you see that when you watch the Facebook page dedicated to them, and that kind of conversation, I just kind of get lost in watching you guys have that conversation. I can't have that with you. I'm not a shed hauler. I haven't hauled sheds, but it's kind of interesting to just sit back and watch the dynamic of it constantly. You hear these conversations. What is your, man, you've done this for a long time. If you were to sum everything up in your experience with shed hauling over this time, how would you sum it up? What would you say your experience has been like?
Well, I kind of borrow from Dave Ramsey, I guess. I always say we're blessed a lot more than we deserve. You know, shed hauling it's had its ups and downs. I mean, in the beginning it was rough. I mean, that's why I can really, is it sympathize or empathize, whatever, with with the guys that are having the struggles and going through, trucks breaking down and don't know how you're going to fix it. Where's the money coming from? I mean, I've been there. I've done that.
Yeah.
And, I vividly remember the truck I used for deliveries, 2000 Ford, Power Stroke with a 6-speed. Clutch went out on it. And I did not have the money to pay for a clutch. I didn't have it. And, I didn't say anything to anybody. We went to church that Sunday, and after church, a guy comes up to me, and he's like, I just feel like I need to give you this. So he gave me some money. I'm like, okay, thanks. Well, his wife went up to my wife and did the exact same thing to her. He gave me $1,000. She gave my wife $1,000. $2,000 after church. And I'm like, there's my clutch.
Yeah.
And it was totally a God thing because I literally didn't say anything to anybody. Nobody knew my truck was tore up, and it was just like they both felt like they needed to give us this money. So I guess that's kind of my thing to these guys that are struggling. Don't give up because you never know where the help can come from. And but kind of get back to your question, I've been there.
Yeah.
I know what that's like. And just trying to expand logically and reasonably and not too fast, not too slow, but literally, it's been aggravating at times, but I can't imagine what else I would do that would allow me to have the lifestyle that we have now.
Yeah.
And I mean, it took a long time to get here, and it's, you know.
Do you think that's the bait that kind of like as a new person, whether you're selling, hauling, building, you kind of see the success that's been built over years, and you kind of anticipate that that's going to happen overnight?
Yeah, I think that's a lot of it. A lot of guys, they see the shiny trucks, they see the lights, they see the chrome, and they're like, "Oh, them guys are making big bucks. I want to get into that," you know. And you know, it's the same thing. I tell my boys the same thing. I'm kind of a vehicle nut, so I buy vehicles, I sell vehicles. I'll drive a pickup and drive by the car lot and like, ooh, I think I might like that one better. I'll trade the thing in a skinny minute and get something else. Mm-hmm. Well, my youngest son is a lot like that, and my oldest son not quite so much. But it's like I told him, I said, I had to work my way up to this. I was driving beaters for a long time.
Yeah.
You know, you can't go from driving a beater to driving an $80,000 truck and expect everything to just be all hunky-dory. It don't work that way. You got to pay your dues. Mm-hmm. And so it's the same way with the shed haulers. You know, in my opinion, if you want to start hauling sheds, now unless you have a really lucrative contract and they're guaranteeing you $200,000 a year or something, that's great. But generally that's not going to happen. And if you go out and you spend $200,000 on a rig, you're just asking for trouble. There's absolutely nothing wrong with starting out with a $20,000 truck, $20,000 trailer, $5,000 mule, whatever. Get your foot in the door, get started, and then try to build from there. I struggle with the whole equipment thing all the time. You know, do I buy new trucks? Do I fix the ones I got? Mm-hmm. What's the best route to do? And
yeah,
I don't know that I have an answer for that, but I do know. I mean, a lot of people saw my trucks at the North Carolina Bash, and in my opinion, they look pretty cool because they're all the same color. You know, they're all silver with silver trailers. They all match. And I think it's pretty cool. But anyway, that's my opinion. But, you know, and they're nice, but they're not decked out with lights. They don't have a bunch of extra chrome on them. But they're nice. And they're optioned out nice. I want my drivers to be comfortable when they're driving. And, you know, they all get their satellite radio and, you know, all that stuff that I pay for. But, you know. So I like to have nice equipment, but I don't feel like I need to have the latest, greatest, fanciest, whatever.
Well, and it certainly didn't start that way.
Absolutely not.
You know, a lot of times you don't see the struggle. I think in business, whether you're hauling sheds or you're in RTO, if you're in shed building, but if you're in some other industry, even outside of this, I think the bait of Satan. I think there's a book out there Dylan was telling me about. I think there's a message or sermon out there called The Bait of Satan. He said, man, you should really listen to this. And that's really what it is it's like, you know, I can acquire that overnight. I can acquire that easy. And there's actually the journey's part, the struggle and the journey is part of the process. Is building the character. You know, like, are you ready for $200,000 a year anyway? Are you know what I mean? Like, are you ready for it? Are you equipped for it? Can you handle it even if it comes your way? So a lot of people definitely don't see the struggle. And I think that's why it's really cool to talk about these things on the microphone, is because you know, we can't go back and show you that, but we can go back and talk about it because it's a real memory that you can relate to people. And I think you do that when you go to shed hauler events now. I mean, you see new guys in it, and I'd imagine a conversation comes up that's probably a little less polished than we do on the podcast. You know, when somebody says, yeah, I went and bought me a new truck, got me a new set of rims, spent, you know, $300,000 on this new setup. Conversation probably happens a little different, but, you know, what advice do you have to those guys? What would you tell them if they're getting into it now? You're a veteran in this industry, in this trade. What's your best piece of advice for a new shed hauler?
Start slow. Don't expect it to go, nuts overnight.
Yeah.
And I think, my biggest thing is the cost of equipment. You don't need to go buy a brand new truck and a brand new trailer and a brand new mule and a brand new everything. I mean, you can start with used equipment. And the other part of it is keep up with your maintenance, keep up with your PM. I mean, if you're not doing your preventive maintenance, I know, I've talked to guys and they're like, well, I don't have time to get my oil changed. I don't have time to get my brakes fixed. I don't have time I'm like, you're either going to make time to do it now or it's going to bite you in the butt, and you're going to do it.
Yeah.
So, that's why I'm saying you can get by with used equipment. You may have a little bit more repair work. I mean, it's just a thing. I mean, there's days I tell my wife, some days it's like, man, I hate trucks. Just because, they're forevermore, something's tearing up on them, but, you can do your repairs, and if you do your preventive maintenance and stay on top of that, used equipment can last you a long time.
Uh-huh.
And so that would, if somebody just, and the other part of that is make sure you have work. If you're because there was a conversation on Facebook the other day about, a guy said something about this guy comes up to him, well, I'm going to start hauling sheds, and
I saw
put
that.
you out of business, whatever.
Yeah.
And it's like, you better have the work lined up first, and then you worry about, whether you're going to start doing it or not. And the other part of all that is too, I see it so often with shed haulers in particular, it seems like that they know how to drive a truck, they know how to set a building, they absolutely hate doing paperwork. Paperwork's a part of it, and that's what I do a lot of. I use people like, I know a lot of people think I don't do anything, which I'm like, all right, whatever. But,
you mean there's some that actually think you do something?
Well, my wife does, because she knows me better than anybody else. But I usually tell people I do all the crap that nobody else wants to do. Business licenses, just the paperwork junk that nobody wants to mess with, but you got to do it. And there again, it's just like preventive maintenance. If you don't take care of it up front, it's going to come back and bite you.
Yeah, as a business owner, it's not even what you want to do. You have to do certain things. So you think there's a lot of freedom in being self-employed, and there can be, but the customer is your boss. Yep. The equipment is your boss. There's something you're accountable to.
Absolutely.
The preventive maintenance, like you said, is your boss. The vision and implementation, the processes and systems, all of that stuff still has to be done, and somebody's got to do it.
Yeah.
At the end of the day,
the guys that say, they don't want to be an employee, they don't want to have a boss. I've always said, I started my own business when I was 17. You have more bosses. Uh-huh. If you're an employee, you work for one superior. Might not even be the guy that signs your check, but you have somebody that, you answer to. Yeah. If you start a business, you answer to everybody. It's just, and the thing, I'm glad you brought up the thing about having work, because it's, okay. So some of the guys get into it thinking they're going to have work, and then they end up losing that work. But these guys that they want to get into it because of the shiny rigs, the chrome, the lights, and it just looks like a good thing to do. And I'm like, who are you going to work for? I don't know. I'll I'm like, and I get a little bit rough on them. I made that post about sometimes the best thing you can do. Not the post, the comment about the best thing you can do is go be an employee. Go drive for Mervin Miller for a couple of years. Go drive for Mervin Vargas or whoever it is. There's guys out. Paul Stallnacker. You never hear nothing about that guy. The guy works harder than anybody I know. Has a bunch of rigs running, and nobody knows what he's doing or who his drivers are or anything. You just about don't hear about him. But I guarantee you that he's a good boss, he's a good employer, and he has good employees. I'd like to put you on the spot and ask you, are you a better hauler, a better business owner, or a better employer? Because you have great employees. Okay, so yeah, you got great employees, but why are they great employees? I always, everything runs up, everything runs down. So I'm not going to put you on that spot because I think you can do all of them and you do them well. But it's a challenge to me sometimes. I feel like I'm on a tightrope between trying to keep everybody happy and at the same time saying, man, you're looking at it completely wrong. It's like anything else. It's a business, and it's a trucking business too, which can eat your lunch in a hurry if you're not careful. And I watch it happen over and over again. There are some guys out there right now that are doing a great job at doing what you said. They started out with junk, and they're building their way up slowly but surely, and they're doing a fantastic job at it. There's others that I just shake my head, and I'm like, you know what? At some point, you're gonna have to learn, I guess. Yeah. But
life teaches you, right? Like, you know, life has a way of teaching you. Yeah,
it does. So which are you, a better business owner or a better employer?
You would have to ask my drivers on that one. I don't know.
Well, I know what your drivers are going to say. So, but
I think personally, I think they're spoiled. But you know, that's just me.
Well, according to that truck sitting out there right now, they are pretty spoiled.
Sirius radio?
Yeah. Well, that's
a pretty good deal.
That's a good perk there. I like that.
every truck.
Yeah. We need to get the podcast on Sirius.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, you do.
So interesting story about me and Sirius. When I was buying, so I went through a spot there where I was I was an owner-operator doing all my deliveries myself, completely on my own, and I did it that way for 5 years. And I could not afford downtime because downtime was more expensive to me. And coming from the trucking industry, I understood that. It cost me more not to run than it did to run. So I literally started out with a $3,500 shed trailer and a borrowed truck. That's my story. I'll tell it later. But what I learned through that was when I was down for a day, I lost more money than repairs would cost me sometimes. So by the grace of God and a miracle, I ended up in a brand new truck. And when those trucks would get close to 100,000 miles, trade it in, get me another truck, and I'd go. And it worked for me that way. Today, the way rigs cost today or the way it is now, I don't see any way that I could even do that now compared to what we did then. Yeah. You made the comment that you bought that little Dodge brand new and ended up dumping a bunch of money in it. Yep. That's the worst thing that can happen. You buy something new and then you end up putting money in it.
Yeah.
And you're down. That's and you're playing a risk that's way out there. Sure, we all want the nice stuff, you know. You like mules?
No.
You want to talk about that a little bit? You know, all the new guys we know, they got to have a mule.
I know. And that's another thing I tell my guys, that they're spoiled. You know, we got these fancy trailers, you know, they got the sideways wheels, the barn spinners, tail shift, you know, all this stuff. And I'm like, you know, and I know I sound old because I am, but I'm like, you know, back in the day, back when I was a boy.
Yeah.
But, you know, when I delivered sheds for Woody, I had a 24-foot trailer that had a tongue extension. That's it. Mm-hmm. It didn't even have a winch on it. You know, it had an up and down dump. That's it. And a tongue extension. I rolled many a shed across the yard on pipes because you had no other option.
Yeah, that's what you did.
And I tell my guys, y'all are spoiled. You know, you got these fancy trailers. I mean, y'all need to go deliver sheds the way I delivered sheds. But, you know, that's part of innovation and whatever. You know, it gets better and easier and whatever. I actually do have 2 mules.
Yeah,
I just bought another one.
I was going to say, like, I'm curious about that question because there's like this dynamic between being a hauler that is trailer only, and then doing some, you know, having a mule. I mean, even hearing people talk, I talked to I think it was the national sales manager at Cook one time, and he's like, you know, it even took us a little while to embrace the mule, and it's right there in the community. Mm-hmm. But it's, you know, like I think that, you know, whether it's innovation mechanically or digitally, like you see sort of just an immediate kind of like firewall get put up whenever something new comes out. There's almost, you know, to me in this industry, it works in a way that if there's a new invention, there's skepticism, heavy skepticism at first.
Right.
You know, maybe the embrace later. To follow up on Sam's question, like, does that mean that you like to set sheds with a trailer? Is that your preference? That's your style?
Absolutely.
Okay. Not that the mule's not handy or hasn't been.
I mean, so I've had a mule for, I don't know when I bought the first one. I think 2011 maybe is when I bought the first one. And I had it for 6 years, and I think it had maybe 80 hours on it when I sold it, something like that. But all my guys, they would much prefer to set with a trailer. They used to all hate the mule, and I don't think they all hate it anymore, but they don't really like it. So, but
because they prefer to set with a trailer, is it because just the
quicker.
ease of? Yeah, I was about to say the ease of getting in and out,
and to kind of, I don't know, whatever, justify that. Our area is different from a lot of areas. I mean, I realize some areas they're a lot tighter, they're a lot whatever, and you almost have to use a mule. For us, you know, we deliver somewhere between 6,000 and 8,000 sheds a year, and we probably use a mule. If you would average it out, it's maybe once a week. Maybe it might average to twice a week. Mm-hmm. But we are starting to use it a little bit more because now customers are telling the dealers, tell them they need to bring that fancy little forklift thing, you know. It's like
it's getting popular enough now to where people know that you have that.
It's a thing.
Yeah.
And you know, I've had my drivers. So I have 2 trucks that are set up for them to haul a mule. My regular trucks don't have mule carriages on it, but I do have 2 trucks that have carriages on them. So, you know, if they know they need the mule, they'll just switch the truck and they'll take the mule truck that day. Well, there's times where the customer's like, yeah, they need a mule to put this thing in there. So the driver will switch the truck, the mule, get out there, and he'll just back in with the trailer and deliver the thing. It's like, haul that stupid mule out here for nothing.
I can see that happening. Do you find that the area that you're in, so I've done some deliveries down what I call south of 20. So we're both in South Carolina. I'm in the upstate, and you're in the central kind of.
Low country.
Yeah, low country. But I know when I came down here, so when I was doing deliveries down here, I was running a semi. So I had to have a mule because you're not going to back a semi into too many people's yards. It happens occasionally. Yeah. Not only was I running a semi, but it was a sleeper tandem axle big truck.
Oh, that big KW.
Yeah, the big KW. And I was doing some deliveries down here. The aggravating part to me was, and it was I had a Mule 5 with a remote on it, and I had 0 issues getting sheds in. I had problems getting my mule back out by itself because it was so sandy that you almost couldn't get the mule out sometimes. Mm-hmm. Is that any of your logic that you deal with a lot more sand than the typical hauler would? Unless you're in Florida, they would.
Right.
Now, if I had a track machine, that would be different. But my 5 did not like sand.
Well, I've heard the track machines aren't that great in sand either, so I don't know what to believe there.
Can you imagine all that sand getting in the tracks and stuff? I can feel it.
Yeah. So the mule that I just bought in January is a 5 with a remote, and now nobody wants to run the 4 anymore, but whatever. But yeah, we have a lot of what they call sugar sand, and that stuff is, I mean, it will bury a 4-wheel drive pickup. So what we deal with on occasion, I shouldn't say a lot, but occasionally is where it's so boggy that your truck won't even, with 6 wheels turning, it won't pull itself out. So you stretch the trailer out and use the hydraulics of the trailer to help push the truck. Yep. And so, yeah, I don't know. But, and my stance for years has been, if I can back a truck and trailer in somewhere to deliver a building, I guarantee I can do that faster than if you got to park your semi on the road, unload your mule that shed in, whatever. Mm-hmm. By the time you get that shed on the mule, I'll be unloaded and gone.
Yeah.
And people are like, oh, no, I can do it faster with the mule. I'm like, I don't think so.
I would definitely agree that it's with the trailers that you run, it is definitely a given that it's less work and it's going to be faster.
Did I hear a new competition proposed there at the Shed Hauler?
Well, we've actually talked about doing that already, and I keep track of the times. We've just never quite had the ability to set the courses all identical.
Yeah.
All it would take, like we've talked about doing it between the semis and the pickups.
Yeah.
Set the course up identical. Because this, if you're not on the Facebook page, this doesn't make any sense. But it's a constant argument on the Facebook page. Can you do it as fast with a semi as a pickup? Can you do it as fast with a trailer as a mule? Throw out the bottom 20 and the top 20, like I always say, and take the middle 60%. And that's what you would gauge it on. And we could, if it wouldn't have rained in North Carolina, we had that whole bottom area. We could have set up identical courses, and we were going to do that. And it was like, okay, let's just, now you brought in the last and most important piece, the operator. So depending who's operating, they are fast on a mule. Depending who's operating, they are fast on a trailer. So that's a given. The one thing I'm going to throw in on this first episode is the fact of how many people come to the bash and decide not to compete, and then once the competitions start, wish they would have.
Yeah.
Just show up and compete. It doesn't matter. It's part of having the fun. It's like you said, the conversations that happen around there. But the guys that show up, and I could get them on podcasts one after the other, of guys that said, I don't know why I didn't, because once I watched it was so much fun, I wish I would have done it. Do you like, you had all your guys there this time. That was cool. I know that's hard to do, but how much do you enjoy seeing all your rigs? And back to your thing you said about all your trucks matching up and everything. You actually won. I mean, you came in second on fleet.
Right.
Did you ever hear why you actually lost that?
I did not. My theory is because I don't have a semi.
No. So the semi would have helped. I actually asked them later what I gave them 5 things they had to go by. How clean they are, how well they're kept up, how well they match up, all that stuff. I don't even remember the other 2. I should have my notes. But they had a list that I wanted them to use. Mm-hmm. And the only thing that cost you was you had a whole row of Rams. You had one Ford.
So it's still silver.
It was silver. The semi thing didn't come up. I'm guessing if you would have had a silver semi, that would have probably got overlooked the Ford part of it. But they're like, man, he had a row of hoods there, and it was gorgeous. But the one hood just didn't look quite right.
Well, that's Luane's fault. He's a Ford guy, so I bought him a Ford.
I was hoping you would say that, because that's why I think that you're probably actually a little better employer than you are a business owner, because you do listen to your guys. He has a Ford literally because his one driver wants a Ford.
Yeah.
That's the only reason. Think about that.
Just the idea of as I'm listening to it, operating a fleet, and this is not to take anything away from a single hauler, but we've talked for, 3 years now on the podcast about how you can make a living selling sheds. You could make a living hauling sheds. You could make a living building sheds. You can make a living RTOing sheds. You can make a living supplying products or services to other shed companies. And some of those guys can do almost a little bit of all of that, maybe. Maybe they scale in such a way that they're vertically integrated on everything. But then you kind of see the diversity of the whole shed industry and this particular niche of shed hauling. Like, there are guys that have a truck, haul for a company. They're tickled pink. They get up every day. They go to work. They come home. Or they're not tickled pink at all, whichever. But then there's guys that scale that model that they enjoy. And that's what you've done with the 7 different,
right.
So like, you've created a fleet, you've kind of created this enterprise. And I mean, the numbers kind of support themselves. You said you move 6,000 to 8,000 sheds a year. So, I mean, you kind of begin to see how that business model starts to play out, or maybe that goes to 10 or 12 or 15. Who knows? Yeah. So you've got that growth mindset where you're kind of like, hey, this is something I like that I can scale. You could also probably be building sheds. You've done that before. You could be selling sheds, but you kind of found the area that you were maybe comfortable with, and you rolled with it, like literally, no pun intended. You you rode with it. Man, I need a little like laugh.
Hopefully he doesn't roll it. Too many of them.
Well, I've had that happen. Not with a shed truck, though, but yeah.
So I want to get the story because I was there, but I want to get the story on this cool looking piece hanging on the wall.
Oh yeah,
behind us. And
so I want to, before he tell, well, I don't know. I'm going to tell my side of it first, and then we're going to let him tell his side. But in order to do that, I have to back up just a little bit. And so we have the Shed Hauler Brotherhood. There's a lot of people that don't know about it yet, but most of the haulers know about it, know what it stands for. Merv is by far one of our biggest supporters. Has always been, and that's just not by funding or whatever. He's always willing to do whatever it takes. And I think if I asked you where that comes from, it goes back to when his clutch went out. Somebody helped him. And there's a handful of guys in the shed hauling industry that if I need something or if somebody else needs something, I can pick up the phone and I can call them and say, look, we got to have this. And if you ask them why, they always said, because somebody was willing to help me. These guys will always stand up and they'll always help. This mirror back here is part of the Brotherhood story. And the fact that we helped the guy, Phil Music. A lot of people know him on the hauler page. And Phil is the most extroverted introvert that I know of. He's always around the hauler page. He's selling sheds. He's not hauling anymore. But he still feels like his success is owed to the Brotherhood and to the Brotherhood of guys on the hauler page. But anyway, he decided to come to the bash, which is not his thing. He does not like being around big crowds of people, but he decided he was going to come. And he asked me if he could bring something in appreciation. And he said, you can auction it off, you can raffle it off, whatever you want to do. Well, as you know, that bash actually got backed off a year, so it was almost like two bashes in one.
Yep.
You know, not only did we give the semi away, but we had the mule to give away for that year because the semi was done the year before. So we had all that going on and all the excitement around all that. And then Brandon Suarez showed up with that semi truck and trailer and the building on it. You know, that was cool. Everybody liked that. Well, then Phil shows up with this mirror. And he asked me, he said, you know, I don't know what it'll bring. Do you like it? And I'm like, I love it. It's great. You know, I don't know what it'll bring because it's a mirror, but based on who it comes from, I said, it all depends on what happens. And what happened was, and it's on video somewhere, this mirror, we auctioned it off, and it started $50. Well, you know, like an auctioneer does. He starts at $500, comes down to $250, comes down to $100, and he ended up at $50. So I'm like, oh, we're going to get about $1,500 out of this thing, and we'll be good. And it took 2 or 3 minutes to get the thing to even $1,500. And if you were there, you know something happened. You could feel it. Something happened in there, and I still say to this day it's because Phil Music needed it. Poor Merv just ended up having to pay for it. But it went 1,500, 16, 17, 21, 25, 35, 45, 5, 75, 8. And it's like, this mirror's at $8,000. And you probably remember the exact number. It was somewhere pushing, he tried to get 10, and I think it was 9,500, 9,600, somewhere around there, 9,500. And I so bad wanted that guy to bid 10 grand one more time just to say we got 10 grand for it, you know. But I asked Merv later what made him do that, and he couldn't give me a good answer. Do you have one yet?
Not really. I guess I'm gonna throw my wife under the bus because I'm sitting there, she's sitting beside me, and I'm bidding, and then it got up to kind of ridiculous money, and so I'd look at her, and she's like, "It's for a good cause." So I'd do it again, and then it'd come back again, and I'd look at her, and it's I'd do it again, and I just kept going. She didn't tell me to stop, so I just kept going.
That's awesome.
And part of it was because Phil made it. And I think, like you said, I think part of that goes back. It kind of took, because I knew the struggles he was having, that he went through. And just the fact that he made it, and the fact that he was struggling, and I knew what that was like. Even though the money didn't go to him, it was just a correlation there that just, I don't know, it just, something snapped in my brain, I guess, and I went a little cuckoo. But
no, it was great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes it just works out that way. I was there at that event.
Did you think I was nuts too?
No, I was. Yeah, I was actually going to let you know I was willing to go up to $94.99 and not a penny more. So you really lucked out. I want you to know. But no, it was exciting watching it going back and forth. And since then, just watching other things at events. Probably what I've taken away from it the most is coming in from the sales side, maybe sales and marketing, maybe relationship driven, over promising what your hauler can do kind of, mentality. I've learned so much about the shed industry from going to these events because I remember catching Sam early on, and this is a story he don't want me to tell, but I remember messaging Sam on Facebook through Messenger, and we talked for a while, and I asked a question, and Sam didn't reply to me for 2 years.
Oh dear.
And I remember when he replied, I said, "Hey, I'm glad you finally got around to that. I know that but I love to tease him about it. But watching him and like these other events coming together, I didn't get to go to the one out at Jason's, but I was gonna go to Cleveland, and something came up that weekend. But my plan was to head down there that weekend. We were supposed to be there. And I think at the time I was working with Irvin at Summit, and the Summit truck I think showed up. I think Kevin
brought it.
I think
Belvedere.
That's right, Belvedere. Yeah. But we were going to be there. We were planning on being there. But then I began to see this whole ecosystem around just shed hauling that's kind of been happening for years. Whether it starts with Woody or guys like that, just the same as going to that event in Pennsylvania, that shed hauler event, and getting a chance to interview Gideon and listening to the shed manufacturing side of the story and how it started. And, he's in 1978, got two brothers building sheds, and his dad says, two of you boys are going to have to get out of this or you're going to flood the market. That's amazing to think about where we're at now versus 1978. So the history of it is kind of cool, but then it's really just these other events and this. Somebody said on the YouTube channel, they said the shed industry, question mark. There's a whole industry. And I'm like, you have no idea.
Exactly.
Until you're in it, you don't really understand it. And the haulers have led this circus better than anybody. You know what I mean? Like they're the most organized monkeys of the bunch of us. I don't know how it happens, but they have, and always say they lead from the front. And we're trying to learn from them, the organizational side in sales. I think the organizational side in manufacturing, how there's a higher calling than just your job. I think there's a purpose for you here on earth, and it means more than just hauling or selling or manufacturing. And I think that's what they've represented well. And the industry has represented themselves well in that. We got a lot of backbiting and cat fights and all that good stuff. But at the end of the day, I think I'd rather be in the industry dealing with the good I've seen than worrying about the bad. Right. So it's been pretty cool. And I think your story's a neat one. Any questions that you have? So like, I know this is Sam's podcast today. This is day one.
I kind of forgot about that.
I still love doing this, man. Is there any questions that you have? I always love to let the interview turn the microphone around and say, what questions do you have of us? Because a lot of times people don't get to ask us questions. So fire away if you have anything for me or Sam or whatever. If you want to put him on the spot, go for it.
Hadn't really thought about that because I didn't know that would come up.
Good. We're done with that.
Sam's like, all right.
We're not going to start a new fad here.
Okay. Hey, moving on.
No, I mean, it would be good. We should start adding that in. I like that idea. That's cool.
Yeah.
What's your biggest takeaway of the industry where it's at today?
That's a loaded question.
Yeah, don't study on it real hard. I know it's loaded because we could go a lot of
so
different
many ways.
But we hear it every day. There's guys that are covered up right now, busy. There's guys that are business as usual, pretty much, and there's guys that are like, this thing's done. Like we're in trouble, and I see all three sides of that.
Yeah.
Just where do you fit? You've been around. What do you see? You're in deep state South Carolina where it gets hot in the summers and doesn't get real cold in the winter. You don't slow down the way a lot of people.
Right.
My
personal opinion is obviously 20 was an anomaly, and I think a lot of people jumped in because they saw all the money flying every which direction, and I mean for me personally, we're definitely I shouldn't say definitely. It seemed like we were slower now than normal for this time of the year, but we ran the numbers and we're pretty much right where we normally are. So it feels slow.
It feels slow.
Yeah. But I just had this conversation with somebody the other day. I think it was one of my dispatchers. I know it happened in Lancaster County years ago. Because like I said, I spent 14 years up there, and I remember thinking back in the 80s, there's sheds everywhere. Everybody's building sheds. They're everywhere. They're going to run out of places to put these things, whatever. And there was a period of time, I don't know exactly when it was, maybe you do, where quite a few of the manufacturers up there just closed the doors. Yeah. They couldn't make it anymore. And I'm thinking that it's a pretty good possibility that some of your upstarts are not going to be here in another year. And, I've been pulling for Old Hickory buildings for the last 17 years almost. And they're huge. And I know there's a lot of people don't like Old Hickory. It's whatever. I'm not going to say anything bad about them because, in my opinion, that's why I am where I am. Because I started, I had my own lot, but I started what I'm doing now with Old Hickory. And as they expanded, I was able to expand. So that being said, they've been around long enough, and I think Brian has got the senses to know how to continue on, even if you have to scale down a little bit or whatever. But I think some of these companies that came along the last few years probably won't be here in the next few. That's just my personal opinion.
That's kind of a cycle that everything goes through. Yeah. I watched that cycle growing up in the housing industry. I watched that cycle from the time I was a kid happen over and over every 8 to 12 years, the housing market roll around. Mm-hmm. And this time it's not doing that. And I say the bigger the balloon gets, the bigger the bang once it goes.
Yeah.
And it's slowed down a little bit. Maybe if we let enough air out of the balloon, it won't actually pop. It'll calm down a little. But if you come to upstate South Carolina and you ride around with me for an hour, it's insane the amount of houses and subdivisions and industry that's going on in our area.
Right.
I know it's not all the way across the nation that way, but that 2040 corridor, I've always said, it's crazy. And at some point, there is a cycle. There always is a cycle. Mm-hmm. We'll always have 4 seasons. I don't care what anybody tells you or believe, but you can always believe there's 4 seasons. And, it's interesting. Who does Paul Stalnaker haul for? Old Hickory. Some of my favorite guys in the industry that you never hear from, they never complain or anything, haul for Old Hickory. I'd give a shout out to Brian that when you're that big, you're going to have people that are going to complain.
Right.
You can't have some.
Shannon and I talked about it on the way
this
here.
Was the whole way down here. I feel like, I told Sam, you hang out in a barber shop, you're probably going to get a haircut at some point, and they've been hanging around the barber shop for a long time. So they're going to get some, and the reality is, for every one person that says, oh, that situation didn't work out, it was ugly for me, there's somebody else that probably combats that by saying, my situation and experience with them has been pretty amazing. It's been really good. The more level of success you see, the more oftentimes you see haters or whatever, those things do happen. And
I get a few of those,
they're a large company, and you cannot deny their presence in the industry, a leader in the industry. So, if your situation hasn't been perfect, find a way to build a bridge and get over that, maybe, right?
That's exactly right.
It's generally speaking, you can't deny that success they've had, and you've given them a lot of, credit here today for your story too. So, yeah.
Well, and that's one thing I will say about Brian Berryman. It's, I've known him now for 17 years, and I try not to bug him about stuff, but I do know that if I have an issue that I feel like I can't resolve with my regional manager or whatever, I can literally call him on the phone, on his cell phone, and he will answer the phone. And he will try to help diffuse the situation if it needs diffusing or whatever. So
that's leadership, man. That's pretty awesome. Yeah. I mean, that's what anybody would, I think, hope to accomplish. So shout out to them for.
I think at the end of the day, we all enjoy throwing shade on the big guys.
Yeah.
The problem is sometimes for me, I take myself too serious, and everybody else does too. When it's literally like, there's not a one of the big corporations that I'm not glad is not there. I mean, I like them to be there. When I see an issue, I do like to see it resolved. Who wouldn't?
Right.
But at the end of the day, they get huge exposure for all of us. We can all build off of them. I still say I can beat any of them on a regional level, and that's the way it should be.
Man, there should, me and you have toyed with this collaboration movement. We like to laugh and cut up at that among ourselves, but there's some value in collaboration and in competition. Competition makes you better.
Yes.
It makes you improve. If not, you get in an ecosystem and you get stagnant, and then it becomes monopolized. So good competition is healthy, but I think, it should be done in the right way. Like, we should be able to compete with also, still being fair and still being moral. Like, we don't have to be immoral about the way in which we compete. And I think that's okay. I think anybody who watches NCAA just got done. You want to watch a good ball game. You don't always want to watch a blowout. No. You want your team to win, but you really want to see a good ball game. So competition breeds that. It makes, I do a little better, so it encourages you to do better. And it's how we improve. Yeah. Iron sharpens iron. So, I mean, it's okay to have that. We just want moral, there needs to be a moral compass in there somewhere that kind of keeps you from going too far. But otherwise we all laugh and joke, but we appreciate them for sure, and what they do for the industry. It means a lot. And I had something else I was going to say, and I lost my whole train of thought. So, don't think I hadn't gotten some shade. Sam's doing a Friday show. You know what I mean? Sam's doing a Friday show, and it's just like whenever I pray on the show and people say, you shouldn't pray, it might offend people. I say, well, then go be offended.
True.
What am I supposed to do about that? Go be offended, But people say, well, I don't know. What do you think about Sam? Let me definitively on the podcast openly say right now, I've done 225 shows. Sam's episode is the most listened to. So rectify that with me for those who think, well, I don't know, is Sam the right guy? Sam's the guy that's got the most listens on something that I encouraged to go do, to create a podcast that was for the industry. And I kind of feel like, man, if that many people want to listen to him, maybe they want to listen to him every Friday. And I think he's got a lot to offer and a lot of value and a lot of wisdom and time and years and service in the industry. And he's hung around a barbershop or two for quite some time. So excited for this adventure, dude.
I kind of feel like it's the Lord throwing shade on me because I was the one that told you originally you'd never make a podcast.
You know what, man?
I think it's all set up.
There's something to be said for tenacity and grit and just keep going. a little bit of won't quit, and that's really, I don't know, man. I believe in people's stories and their testimonies. I believe in history. It's his story. And I believe that people sit down and have podcasts at the Shed Show and at Shed Hauler events and at shed sales events all across the country that don't have a microphone attached to them all the time. And I'd give anything to be able to slip one in there. People ask, well, what about, some of the negativity and stuff? Say, well, we keep negative off the show, not because we ignore that negative happens in the industry or in business in general, but we're not here to throw anyone under the bus. Personal issues, those are things that should be handled in private. Yep. And we like to encourage people here at the podcast. So like, I know people want to go deeper sometimes and say, get into some of that drama, but it's kind of like, man, we need to avoid as much of that as we can. So we like to talk with folks like Mervin and hear the positive stories and the impacts they can help with future generations and just telling their stories. So I appreciate you being here today. And thank you, Sam, for letting me be on your Friday show, man.
Friday show.
I'm excited about this. I can't wait to see where it goes.
We'll work the bugs out of it yet. Anything you want to add that you didn't get to throw in yet?
I was debating about saying something, but I think I'm just going to pass on that.
So that'll be the second episode?
I don't know about all that. I don't know. But one thing I will say about him, you're talking about why people like to listen. Mm. One thing I've noticed about Sam, and I've known him for quite a while now, is some of his Facebook posts. Well, I guess they're on MeWe now, maybe. But some of them I'll read them and I'll be like, what the heck is he talking about? He goes places in his brain that my brain doesn't even have them places, He
had an opportunity to ask the question. There was his opportunity.
Well, okay, how does your brain go to some of them places? How about that?
You have to ask my wife.
Wow, we're all made from different experiences, man, and that's what makes it beautiful. Sam's a great content creator.
Yep.
And he's got a big old heart, and he really has I think a heart for the industry that I've seen in private. His work through what we did down there with the tornado. We set out to do these generators, and Sam was like, I got a new level I'm going to hit here. And it's like, wait a minute, we're handing out 20, 30, 40, 50 generators. And I'm over here thinking, that's good. That's a good deed. And he's like, I think we can come down here for 6 months and rebuild some homes. And I'm like, bro, you're on another level. You're on another level. So
see, that's what I'm talking about. He just kicks it up another notch somehow or another.
Yeah. Well, good for you, man. Hey, anything you want to say, man? Welcome to the podcast. Yeah, I'm excited.
I'm still working on all that because I do feel like the Lord's like throwing shade back at me, the whole heaping coals of fire on my head, because I shot you down right out of the gate. I remember exactly where we were, on what road and where we were on that road when you said, hey, I think we're going to do a podcast. And I'm like, a what? Yeah, where people sit and talk. I'm like, no, there's no. And now it ends up coming around. So yeah, we're good on our time.
That's all good, man.
I'm just so glad that it worked out to where I get to have one of my main squeezes on for this guy. He's a behind the scene guy. You never hear much out of him or whatever, but that's the way all the good ones are.
Yeah.
Phenomenal dude. It's been great to work with, and I just wish I'd have known him 20 years before. We've had a lot of fun together. We've worked together, and we've been through some stuff together, and it's been good. And just appreciate you very much. And I know the industry does too.
Yeah, amen, man. I don't know that we can leave it any better than that. My stomach's growling, and I think.
That's one thing we can throw in here yet. We can give a shout out. We're actually going to eat at his restaurant.
Yep, we have one of those too.
So Miller's Bread Basket.
So right if you guys make your way down here.
So absolutely. So there's two. So he always posts on Facebook about going to the Aiken Fish House. And I've been there, and I know what level that's on. So I'm really looking forward to finally getting to go to Miller's bread basket. Is that right?
That's it.
Miller's bread basket.
It may be a big letdown. We'll see.
No. and I also know that you actually enjoy cooking brisket, and you do that there sometimes on occasion as well.
Once a month, I smoke brisket for the restaurant.
Yep. So he has
6 at a time.
Yeah. So he has a restaurant. They do very well at that.
That's awesome.
And here just lately, he actually bought a hardware store that he's working on.
So you're not really ambitious.
No,
He's not really.
That's what I'm getting from this.
It's great.
Well, hey, I appreciate you sitting down with us, and this is why I love that. I know Sam will be getting more of these stories, man. I can't wait to listen to these episodes. Be a good ride. Yeah, appreciate you coming on.
Enjoyed it.
Hey, this is Mo Lunsford in sunny Union Grove, North Carolina, and we want to say thank you to all the guests and listeners.